Welcome to this video about registering supported accommodation for children in care and care leavers aged 16 and 17. My name's Lisa Pascoe. I'm Deputy Director at Ofsted. Those of you watching the video will know the Department of Education have now published the quality standards and accompanying guidance around supported accommodation. At Ofsted, we'll be publishing our registration guidance on the 3rd of April, and we hope this video will help you in understanding a bit more about the expectations. It's designed for people who are applying to register as a provider of supported accommodation, or anyone who's interested generally in how Ofsted's going to approach in this new work. I'm joined today by Matthew Brazier, who's been the project director, and Helen Humphreys, our specialist advisor. Matthew, I think we want to start by going through the timeline with people.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Hello, everyone. Many of you will know that the government published the supported accommodation guidance and standards on the 23rd of March, and they expect to lay the regulations on the 6th of April. Meanwhile, we'll be publishing our registration guidance on the 3rd of April before the window for application opens for applications later in the month on the 28th of April. Providers must have had an application accepted as complete by Ofsted within 6 months to operate legally. And then this summer, we'll be consulting strongly on our inspection proposals before we pilot our inspections in the autumn and begin inspections of supported accommodation in April next year in 2024.
So thanks for the timeline, Matthew. It might be helpful to give people a little bit of an overview of the standards.
Yeah, of course, Lisa. The regulations set out standards that must be met by a supported accommodation service and within its individual settings. And the standards describe outcomes that each young person must be supported to achieve while living in supported accommodation. Each of the 4 standards includes an aspirational outcome statement, which has children at its heart, and it's followed by a set of underpinning measurable requirements that providers and settings must achieve in meeting each of the standards. These 4 standards are collectively then the quality standards, and there are core themes that feature across all the 4 standards, which constitute important features of the standard in practice. So some of these themes include the views, wishes and feelings of young people, collaboration and working together with partners, and giving children the opportunity to build strong and meaningful relationships with people who are important to them.
Thanks, Matthew. And it's really important people go to the DfE guidance for themselves to understand the detail that sits underneath there. But Helen, given we now have the guidance from government, can we give people a bit of a flavour of what registration looks like and what people need to do?
So as most of you know, the decision was taken some time ago to register at the provider level rather than individual supported accommodation addresses. The registration process will be similar to the registration arrangements for currently regulated provisions such as children's homes and independent fostering agencies, which some of you may be familiar with. You will apply to Ofsted by completing various application forms and submitting various documents. And we will ask you for evidence of the relevant policies and procedures that you have. And we expect these are things that you, if you are an existing provider, that you've already got. You can find out more of those details in the government guidance and in our registration guidance when we publish it. Once we've received your application form, we'll carry out checks of suitability of the relevant individuals involved in your application. We will then make arrangements with you to visit a representative sample of your accommodation. The main difference between what we would normally do and the early registration activity for supported accommodation will be that for majority of those applications, children and young people will already be living in the provision. So we'll take the opportunity to speak to children wherever we can in order to reach our decisions.
So Helen, how long will all of this take?
So on average, across our usual registration activity, the turnaround time for applications to register from the point of accepting their full application, and that means that everything's there, the fee has been paid, and carrying out all the checks that we need to, is usually around 17 weeks. But this is only an average. If all goes smoothly, it could be quicker. But sometimes registrations can get delayed or take a little longer than we would like them to be. And this is usually around delays in receiving information, references, responses from the local authority, or the DBS checks. But for supported accommodation, we have established a dedicated central registration team, and they will respond to registration applications. So we are not managing these applications alongside our existing work.
Helen, Matthew said at the start that people have to apply by the 27th of October. What happens if Ofsted hasn't processed somebody's application by that date?
So there will be a period of transition. If providers submit a complete registration application to Ofsted before the 27th of October 2023, they can continue to legally operate beyond October while we process your application. From that same date, local authorities will be prohibited from placing 16 and 17-year-olds with providers that are not registered with Ofsted unless that provider has submitted a full registration application to Ofsted. We consider that the application is complete once you've paid the fee. However, if you are an existing provider and you have not submitted an application that we've accepted before October the 27th, if you continue to operate after that point, you will be operating illegally.
So that's a really important date for people to have in mind, Helen. But I think we'd also stress, actually get your application in much earlier so that we can process it quickly and smoothly for you. We don't want people being concerned and anxious on the 27th of October about have they got everything in and in place. It's a work towards date rather than a hard deadline. Matthew, just in terms of the detail of supported accommodation, we've talked in the consultation, DfE talked in the consultation about categories. What are the categories of accommodation? What has been decided?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. There'll be 4 distinct categories of accommodation. The first, single occupancy, that's for children who are living on their own, but also might be living with others as part of a family unit, such as their partner or their own child. The second category is for group living, which is ring fenced for looked after children and care leavers only. That may include young people who have become over 18, as can the provision in the third category that isn't ring fenced for looked after children and care leavers. The fourth category is accommodation and support that is provided by an individual or individuals in their own home, and this will include supported lodging schemes. Providers can apply to be registered for more than one category, and if they wish to add a category, they can apply for a variation to their registration.
So that last point is quite important, Matthew, isn't it? That at the point of registration, people need to be able to set out which of those categories they want to be in, and it could be anything from 1 or 4. But yeah, once they are registered, people can change their mind and add additional categories or remove categories from their registration.
Yeah, they can apply to vary that. Yeah.
Helen, another sort of part of the registration is the registered service manager. It'd be useful to tell people a little bit about that role.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. So each registration application must have one person who is going to apply to be the registered service manager, who will have oversight of all the providers' addresses and be accountable for the standards being met. It is possible to have more than one registered service manager if that is a job share arrangement. It'll be up to the individual provider to decide where and who in the organisation that the registered service manager should be. What we'll want to know is, has that manager got the capacity to ensure that the standards are met? And that will depend on the effectiveness of the overall management arrangements. And we will discuss this with you when we assess your application and the suitability of the person that you've put forward.
Thanks, Helen. I think another question for people is who should be the provider? We know that the arrangements there can be complex and diverse, but ultimately one organisation must take on the role of the registered provider. And that organisation that becomes the registered provider is then responsible for making sure that the standards and regulations are met. Usually that'll be the lead organisation for the overall support package, but that will vary. Ultimately, local authorities and supported accommodation providers that exist may need to have conversations about who is going to take on that responsibility, but one organisation must take on that role. Helen, what sort of support's available to people, given that this is very new?
So, yes, it is very new, and we absolutely understand that there's a great deal of anxiety amongst the sector about people who are considering about making that application. Most of the current providers we've spoken to, though, welcome the introduction of standards and regulations and say that they do intend to register. But we are very aware of some of the concerns and that some existing providers may choose not to offer the service to 16 and 17-year-olds looked after children and care leavers in the future. And we are working very closely with the DfE and those providers to address those concerns. We also know that for many providers, applying to register doesn't look straightforward, and it isn't that straightforward. The National Children's Bureau will be leading on lots of activity to help the sector to be ready. So do look out for more information about those opportunities. Hopefully, our guidance is clear enough to help you submit applications to register in good time. But we will try and answer any questions that you have to try and help you. And we will try and help you as much as possible once you've submitted your application. So hopefully the process can run smoothly and promptly. And the earlier you submit your application, the more likely we are to be able to provide you with the help that you need.
Thanks, Helen. Matthew, one of the other conversations that's been had, and we've had many conversations about it, is about what does Ofsted mean about care and support, and where does supported accommodation fit on that continuum?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Yeah, we're very aware that it's not easy or straightforward for providers to navigate between care and support, but we're clear that care and support are both part of a continuum. Children's progress rarely follows a straight line, and we really can't see any situation where children of this age 16 and 17, won't need some element of care in certain aspects of their lives. There will be some red lines that will mean that providers may need to consider alternative routes to registration, but we don't want supported accommodation providers to think that providing any kind of care, however temporary that might be, will mean that they're automatically operating illegally. Supported accommodation should be caring, it should be kind, and it should be nurturing.
Absolutely right, Matthew. That caring, nurturing, supportive environment is so important for all children. And having said that, we're committed to getting the regulatory balance right. We believe quite strongly in right touch regulation, which in reality is about being proportionate. This is a really diverse and dynamic sector, so regulation needs to be sufficiently responsive, but also sufficiently robust. So while right touch means we're more proportionate in terms of registering at provider level, having a registered service manager that might look different in different organisations, that doesn't mean that we will scrimp on quality. This is still about looking for quality for children, and we, in no doubt, we will take action if we are not satisfied that provision does meet the right quality. So just to summarise the main points, they're set out here for you. The main thing is, do read the government guidance and do read our registration guidance. Read both carefully. You need to know and understand both. We will start accepting applications to register on the 28th of April. Get them in early, as we've said. That will help you and it will help us. You need to have a registered service manager for each registration, and you can be registered for more than one category or several categories. It's up to you depending on the type of service that you deliver. But get your applications in early. If you've got any questions, there's an email address here that you can use. Send them in and we will come back to you as quickly as we can. I hope this has been helpful. Thanks for watching.